and welcome to the next and current episode of Perspectives with Jeremiah Stephenson. I'm your host, Jeremiah Stephenson. Before we get into the actual interview today, thank you all for your patience. I haven't released an episode for about a month and a half. I've been trying to make sure things get together. I've been trying to make sure I have my next couple guests before the end of the year, get situated and get those things together because I'm finishing up the podcast on episode 24 that we'll be releasing right before 2020. So I've been getting all those things together and just dealing with stuff and making sure everything's perfectly set up. So thank you all for your patience, and welcome to the show. Today we have Annette Stilwell. She is a wonderfully interesting person. She is a business owner. She is a creative. She is someone that is always up to something. She has a wonderful story. She is someone that I respect highly. Annette Stillwell, how are you doing today?
Hey, just fine.
Awesome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I always like to say we jump right into it. So if you could give me a little bit of who are you and what is your story?
Well, I'm an old woman who's been working for a lot of years. My company in April of 2020 will be 40 years old.
Ooh, and what is that company's name?
It is Stillwell Casting.
Yes.
And we do casting for television commercials. And it's just a really interesting profession, to tell you the truth, because every day is a different day, different people, different clients. And I've just always enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, we have a business that pays actors and actresses as well as crew. And so that also goes on in my office, which is a studio and in Midtown Atlanta.
Nice. And I will let everyone know Annette is also my boss. I'm employed in her
Jeremiah
company.
came one day with his resume thinking he was coming to meet somebody else.
Mm-hmm, for a production house.
And so we looked at his resume and thought, well, he's kind of nice. Let's talk to him. So we talked to him and then made an interview with Jeremiah for some weeks later. Mm-hmm. And he drove up to Atlanta, and before he drove back home, he was hired. Yep. And he's been there ever since.
Ever since I was walking to my car, and Sarah, the casting producer, she was running out, and she was like, hey, we just wanted to let you know before you left, like, you have the job. So that was really crazy because I hadn't let you all know that I wasn't living in Atlanta. So when I got the interview, I was like, I was sitting at dinner with one of my friends and he was like, are you going to go? I was like, I could tell them that I don't live there and do a Skype interview. And he's like, no, dude, like, just take off tomorrow and drive up there. It's like 4.5 hours. It's not a big deal. Because we're used to driving all the time. So,
yeah, and what's funny is that I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. I did not know that you weren't in Atlanta.
Yes. So
we would have made it a little more convenient for you to come for an interview had we known that. But I'm real glad you made the drive.
I am too. I'm very happy I was able to make that decision because I wanted to show that I was willing to do what I needed to make the next steps. Because at that point in my life, I was like, I'm trying to figure out what to do. Like, I know film is what I would like to pursue. Mm-hmm. What aspect of it, I'm not sure. So my boss had given me a week off and let me run around Atlanta, driving around, dropping off my resume at several places. Mm-hmm. And Stillwell was the only place I heard from. That year, the following year, one of the places that I dropped my resume off, they reached out to me. Oh. And I was sitting at work and they called me and I was like, I've actually found some employment.
Was it something you think that you may have wanted to do? Or
what was the company? It was... But it's somewhere in Atlanta, and I'll find out and let you know.
Well, I was just curious, but are you glad you got
the first
absolutely,
offer? Yes. I am. It helped me, I guess, in a way, grow up and get to a place where I was like, hey.
Well, you learn very quickly, and we were thankful that you joined us.
Yes, I'm thankful to be there. So let's take us back to your childhood. What was your childhood like?
Well, I grew up in a little tiny town in North Carolina, Bessemer City, North Carolina, 4,000 people, really tiny. It was an old mill village, but my grandmother had built a pretty nice house there, and so I grew up with a wonderful childhood. My siblings and I talk about how much fun we had as kids, and another thing is that I had a mother who was paraplegic from the time she was 18 and in college due to an automobile accident. So she was in a wheelchair before she ever married, before she ever had children. And so that's how I grew up with a handicapped mother. But to call her handicap is a misnomer because she was just an amazing individual who was editor of a newspaper, had 3 children, wonderful marriage, very good writer, huge inspiration. So I had a different childhood, but a good one.
Yeah. What was your high school years like?
It was great. I just flitted through high school, having just too much fun. My brother was 2 years older than me, and he was a braino. He was really, really smart. And so 2 years behind him, every time I get a teacher that had him, they would just worry, how did that happen? But I was a cheerleader. I was head cheerleader. I was in about everything you could do in a small town and a small high school. And I loved it. I had such fun.
You've done a lot of things. Before we got onto the podcast, Annette gave me a 5-page little document of some of the things that she remembers that she's done. And I did not know that you did ballet.
Tell me a little bit about that. I started taking ballet. In our little town, we did not have a teacher. So my mother would have to drag me to the closest town, which was Gastonia, North Carolina, to go to dance. And the truth is, I took ballet, tap, jazz. I took toe when I was older. But I stuck with the ballet for 12 years.
Okay.
To the point that even when I was in college, I did a year of ballet. So, I mean, I'm short and tiny, or was at the time, and I was not your typical ballerina shape, just because I was so short, and but I loved it, and I had great friends who took dance with me, and it was just always a lot of fun.
Awesome. What was your college years like? Where did you go to college, and what was that experience for you?
Well, I went to Queen's University in Charlotte, which is an all-girls school, and it's a sister school to Davidson College, and my brother was at Davidson. So he was a junior at Davidson when I was a freshman at Queen's. And so that was part of my interest in going there. In addition to that, they gave me a scholarship, an academic scholarship.
Oh, very nice.
Which I didn't deserve, but they gave it to me. And I lost it my first semester of my freshman year because I just loved to have too much fun. So at that time, the university was a 3-point system. Most colleges and universities are 4-point. Okay. So what that means is, an A is worth 4, a B is worth 3, a C is worth 2, and a D is worth 1. Well, ours was a 3.0. And my first semester, when I lost my academic scholarship, my grade point average was a 0.0.
Ooh, wow.
That means I had one F, which was -3, and one, was it a B? B that was a +3.
Okay.
And everything else was D.
Gotcha.
So it was a 0.0. And they don't pay you to stay if you make a 0.0.
Right.
So then I was on academic probation.
Okay. What were you going to school for?
Well, my original, what I thought I would study was psychology. And I changed from that to literature. Just because I love to read.
It's just reading. So what?
I love to read. I love stories. I love authors.
What encouraged you to move towards psychology? Why was that your first choice?
I don't really know. It was something I didn't know anything about, and I thought, well, this would be fun to learn it. And I learned that it was too hard for me.
So right out of college, what did that look like for you? You graduated.
Well, in between, when I was in college, I was a reporter for the Charlotte Observer. I was a women's news reporter. And there was a guy from Chapel Hill who was a men's news reporter. We were equal. And that was my first time with discrimination because we had the same background, we had the same everything, but he got paid more than I did. And that was my first time to go, this is not fair.
Right, absolutely.
This is not right.
Absolutely.
So that was my first inkling that women were not quite treated the same. After that, I moved from that because I had some nice feature stories that gave me a decent portfolio. And with that, I got a job as a writer with an ad agency.
Okay.
And I totally loved that. I loved writing advertising. I loved just the whole idea of the advertising community and the work. And I wrote a TV commercial, a couple of them, that were filmed by a film production company that actually won some awards. And I loved film production. So I thought, well, that might be something I like. And as it turned out, the company that filmed those commercials offered me a job as a producer.
Cool.
So I thought, this is good. Mm-hmm. So I took a cut in pay and decided I would try that side of the industry. And it turned out to be a wonderful thing because I did learn, and I loved production.
Yeah.
And did that for a long, long time.
Yeah, I was going to ask how many years estimated did you do production?
All through the 70s. I got married toward the end of the 70s, and I had one child, and my daughter Annie. And after she was born, I was still producing, but it was really difficult to do sunrise shoots and, do those long days. 14-hour days. And my husband was a film director. So he was gone so much. He did a lot of travel because he also did commercials, but he did a lot in Detroit. He did a lot in Florida. He was just gone a lot. Mm-hmm. So there was one day that I had a sunrise shoot, and my babysitter called me the night before saying she was not going to be able to come. And as producer, I could not go to the shoot.
Absolutely.
So the only thing I could do is hire a nurse. I hired a registered nurse, that you can call 24 hours.
Right.
She made twice what I made that day.
Oh, wow.
Because she was at my house for a good 12 hours.
Right.
And so after that, I got a nanny, and that really worked out well. And then I got pregnant with my second child, which was Aaron. And while I was about 6 or 7 months pregnant with Aaron, I worked on a show that was called WKRP in Cincinnati. And it was on one of the networks. And I was actually a unit production manager for some exterior scenes up in Cincinnati for the show. And I was in a helicopter location scouting, and it was not pressurized, and I passed out, and then decided that this is probably not a good thing for me to be doing while I'm pregnant. In the meantime, the Screen Actors Guild went on strike, and we sat in a hotel room for about 3 days, and I thought, I just need to change what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So I came home, had Aaron early, which I'm afraid might have been because of that, and decided I would just maybe concentrate on casting, because I was already doing a lot of that because there were no casting directors in Atlanta, and people would ask me, to put on a session just for certain things, and I thought, well, I'll just do that, full time, and it worked. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Okay.
And then at the same time, I didn't start a talent payment company. I bought one.
Okay. And you and a friend did, correct?
No, I bought it from a friend.
Bought it from a friend, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And did that for many, many years. Well, not that many, it was like 10 or 11 years. Mm-hmm. And then a New York company bought it.
Oh, okay.
And I could not compete with them for 5 years. But my husband and I said, well, we won't compete with talent payments. We'll start doing crew payments.
Cool.
So we did that.
Moving around just a little bit.
So we did that.
Adjust.
And then when my non-compete was over, we added the talent back into the payroll company.
Very cool.
So that has always worked, together, the casting and the payroll and all that. And so it's worked out well.
Nice. I do want to jump back a little bit to your childhood. You've been working for a long time. How old were you when you held your first position as a cash register at your dad's shop?
Oh, I grew up working in a dime store. My dad had dime stores in 2 small towns in North Carolina, and I loved going to the dime store. The clerks were always so sweet to me, and they would take me to lunch and stuff. But I also learned at a very young age how to ring up sales on the cash register. And back in the day, we would make a like Easter baskets and
Okay.
just really some fun stuff. And I loved the dime store. In fact, I think there's a little merchant still in me.
Oh yes, no, that is a real thing. I love that because I think that helped pave the way for your workmanship
Yeah,
and your work
I think-
ethic. I think that was a really good addition to growing up.
I think so, and I think that I grew up in an atmosphere of my dad being his own boss, owned his own thing. My mother was her own boss. She was editor of a newspaper. I grew up in a family where nobody worked for anybody else. They
Right.
did it on their own.
Right.
And I think that's something that you just absorb, maybe. I don't know.
Absolutely. It looks like it. It definitely
Yeah, I
looks
mean,
like
it's like I don't understand the corporate world.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I don't understand, that, I don't know, just that environment.
How long have you lived in Atlanta at this point?
Like over 40 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
What have you seen just in the city itself, outside of the entertainment business?
Oh my gosh.
What have you seen
Oh.
change? What's the differences? What have you loved? What have you seen that's kind of like, oh, Atlanta's different now?
It's way different. Our first house was in Ansley Park, which is a very nice, expensive neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia. And at the time we bought a house for $58,000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That house, last time I saw it, sold was over $500,000.
Oh, wow.
And it was a small little house. It was cute as it could be, but it was small. And then we bought where I live right now in 1982. And this house is like 100 years old. So apparently when this house was built, there was a dirt road out there.
Now, and this house is one of the first houses built within
On this road.
On this road.
On this
Okay.
road. It was a dirt road.
Awesome.
And the thing, Buckhead, we used to call it the Village, the Buckhead Village. And the Village was, I don't know, it was a lot of young people, a lot of just bars and stuff and fun stuff. And now it's very much Rodeo Drive. It's not, it's not what it was.
Yes.
Midtown, we used to take people from out of town that came to visit. We'd ride them down Peachtree just to show them all the women trying to get all the hookers on Peachtree.
Right.
Because it was really,
Yeah. that's
it was a
the time
strip.
it was. Yeah.
And that is not the case anymore.
Not at all.
So,
Not
no.
at
So,
all.
I mean, the city has changed amazingly. And up on Peachtree, there's that Darlington Apartments that has the population.
Yes.
And I can remember, and I don't know what that population is now. I think it's close to 4 million
I
or
couldn't
something
tell
like
you.
that.
I know it's a couple million.
Yeah.
I don't think it's 5. I think it's
I think
either
it's
right
around
at
4,
4 or
yeah.
a little over 4.
I can remember when we saw it almost at 1 million.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, the city has just grown by leaps and bounds.
Yes, absolutely. Working in the entertainment business, what were some of the things that you got to see that were kind of just amazing to you? Because we do talk about that sometimes at work. It's just the different experiences being in entertainment that we get to have.
Well, back in the 80s, I did films. Now I just do commercials, but I did films, and I did one with, I've done a number of them with some fun people. I don't know if you know the writer Neil Simon.
Mm-mm.
Did a really cool film with him. Who was it? It's hard for me to remember these names. Candace Bergen did a film with her. Walter Matthau. I mean, some of the old film
really
guys,
people,
they were really, really cool. One thing that was fun is my husband and I worked on, I cast one that had Evander Holyfield
Oh, wow.
in it, and I can remember Bill and I getting our picture made with Evander, and we each had our arm around him, and it was like our arm around a cement column.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, the man was solid.
That's wild.
Just solid. Shaquille O'Neal we do some work with. I think I might have mentioned to you Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Did not work with him. But what happened is I had a brand new little 16 millimeter camera. That was the camera that had the first sound strip on the film. So back in the day, you couldn't have a camera that had a film strip, but this was the first one. And I was in Greensboro, North Carolina on a job, and staying at a hotel. And while I was at that hotel, I went outside to play with my new camera and to take pictures. And these little children were out there playing and having a big time. So I asked them, could I film them? And they said yes. And so we did all kinds of little setups. And turned out they gave me a poster because they were performing in Greensboro that day. Mm-hmm. Now, this is many, many years ago. This is early to mid-'70s, I guess.
Okay.
And as it turned out, it was Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, mm-hmm. and their dad screamed out from the balcony for them to get away from that white honky.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, he was really ugly to me.
Oh, my gosh.
And they just snapped to and went away quickly, but they'd already given me a poster.
Right.
So I think I've shown you my...
Yes, we just found that. We just found that within the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I knew I had it. I just didn't know where I had it.
Awesome. Where'd you find it at? Was that at the
office?
At the office. Okay,
yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. No, that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. You just released a book this year.
Yes.
You and your siblings put together a book. What is this book called?
The book is called Lossie, Live to Laugh, and it's actually a book that my mother wrote, more her memoirs from the time she had her accident in college that put her in a wheelchair, and her early life. It doesn't go much into just the third child's birth, which was my sister Lisa, who was born in 1959. So her story kind of ends maybe in the early 70s. Mm. But I've had that for many years and kept thinking I wanted to do something with it. She had a agent in New York at one time who was helping her with the book and with her writing, and he died. Mm. So she never really pursued it. It was pre-internet, pre-everything. So there was really... At that point, she just didn't pursue it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I'm going to look into this. And then decided, well, I'll get my family involved and get them helping me look it over and read it and go through it. And we did that over several occasions, which was such fun to read her words and to think about how this would come about. And then I sent it to a publicist in San Francisco that is my cousin's daughter. So she's a cousin, and asked her to help me put it together for the family. And when she read it, she said, I think this is marketable. I think you need to do it for real. Don't just do it for the family. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And we did it, and we had a launch on August 3rd, and it's gotten really good reviews.
Yes, it has.
It's sold quite a number of copies, and it has won an award from the North Carolina Society of Historians. Mm. Because it's got a lot of North Carolina history in it, because that's where she was from.
Right. That's awesome. What was... I think I remember you mentioning it took about 20 years to kind of go through everything with the family to get it to the point of being released.
Well, what happened is I got it, but then I had children, and I just didn't have time to do anything with it. So it wasn't until... I'm trying to think when it would have been that I realized I could scan her typewritten pages into a Microsoft program, mm-hmm. because it was very difficult to do it with the hard copy. So once I was able to scan it and share it with my family is when we started. So we really didn't start meeting until about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So we had a get-together here at my house, and I had my brother... my cousin and his wife, another cousin from Columbus, Georgia. And what happened is when everybody found out that we were all getting together in Atlanta, all the kids and grandkids wanted to come. So that weekend of work that we were supposed to have our first work meeting, we had about 30 people here.
Oh, wow. All in this house?
They had Airbnbs,
okay.
So we ate here.
Okay.
And we made them all go away so we could at least spend a full day on the book. But... And then we did another long weekend at Pawleys Island, South Carolina, the beach. Mm-hmm. And then a few more times. But once it was all, scanned and shareable to all of us, we were able to do things,
streamline that process.
Mm-hmm. And then we sent it to a copy editor, mm-hmm. Who was in L.A. Mm-hmm. And he did the... checked it for grammar, spelling, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. He didn't really change words because we instructed him he couldn't.
Right. Absolutely.
These were not our words. They
Correct.
were our mother's words.
Mm-hmm.
And then we hired a book designer out of New York who put it together.
Okay. Now that it's finally released, what is that feeling that it's getting recognized, that it's been given awards, that it's being held in esteem?
It's absolutely thrilling. Yeah. I mean, it is so exciting. Even if, this is it, it's still so exciting.
I think it's really beautiful to be able to take your mother's legacy and to be able to share that with so many people, and to see the positivity that it's been able to help others, and the recognition that it's received for it being historical work and a real personal work.
Right.
I think it's amazing to see that process.
And it's got a lot of humor in it.
Yes.
I mean, the idea that it's about someone having a terrible wreck, it's full of humor. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, I think. I mean, it's... I've had so many people call me with questions about, well, what happened to your dad? What happened to so? I mean, it's like they kind of got into the story.
Right, they want to know more. Are you going to do a follow-up?
I don't know, because I'm not the writer my mother was, so I don't know that I could. But there's something in me that wants to, finish the story again, maybe just for the family.
Right. I think that being able to have something that is from the parents that you can pass down from generation to generation is really cool, because I think it helps the younger generation see how far the family has come as one unit, even individually what they've done, but as a unit, the name that they possess and the things that they can build on top of that. I think that's really encouraging for the younger generations to have.
Yeah. What was it? I think it was something my grandmother used to say, something about remember from whence you came.
Yes.
Yes. And it's like... you were taught to do things a certain way and to behave a certain way and all that. And I think also it's very helpful to know how everybody else lived back in the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially if it was a good life.
Yes. Yes. And one of the things I asked, and we went over this a little bit, is did you have any struggles or what were the things that you had to overcome yourself throughout life?
Well, it's kind of hard to believe, but I was a little bit shy, but
really?
Not in high school and not in college, but maybe, I don't know, I think later.
Was it entering the workforce?
It wasn't the workforce. It was more, like, say, with my children going to school. I was real hesitant to meet the other mothers and stuff. I was just really shy. And I think I'm over that.
Was there a sense of not belonging because you were...
Well, I was surrounded by a lot of Buckhead Bettys, and I grew up such a hippie that I had to fit in with the norm of where I live. And the other thing was, I mentioned that about the pay I had at the newspaper being... I did have a little harassment at one small juncture. I worked at a radio station as a writer on a little newspaper they put out. And the radio manager did some really inappropriate language. He didn't do anything to me, but he spoke to me really inappropriately. And I left his office and got on the elevator and went home and never went back.
Absolutely.
I mean, I just didn't even clean up my desk.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been there that long, so there really wasn't anything there. But on the other hand, I was going home from that thinking, well, I don't have to go back. And I thought, well, I'm young and my parents would help me. And, I was not a single mother with children to feed and house. And that I had that opportunity to walk away from that. Yeah. And that women don't.
Yeah.
That not many women can do that.
Yeah.
And how many of them have put up with it, But again, I never was like a big women liber. I always had the job, that I wanted. I always felt really fortunate to have the jobs I had. So I didn't really get, big into that movement other than the recognition that there was
it was
disproportionate.
Is something that's happening,
yeah.
Yes. And I will say, I think that being at least knowledgeable of the situation, you can deal with it in a certain area because you are now an employer. You employ men and women. You have the ability to give them the equal pay that was not necessarily given to you at certain positions.
That's exactly right.
So I think that not everyone can be one of the pioneers for something, but what can you do with what you have?
Exactly.
And I think you've done a wonderful job.
Through.
Yeah,
Yes.
and follow through exhibiting that equality between everyone at your own place of business. And I respect that. And I think that's wonderful. And I would encourage you to, like, in your own way, you have done that.
Well, and you see, too, that my daughters are now part of the business, and they're going to follow through the same way because that's how they know.
Yes.
You know, they will do the same thing.
And it's being able to, you've raised wonderful children to understand and respect people, and you've emplaced the values that you've learned, and they've definitely gotten their own over time, but it's been able to bleed through that family, and I think that's wonderful. It's really beautiful. You have a wonderful family, Annette.
Oh, thank you.
You have a beautiful family.
I'm very proud of my family.
Yeah. I always ask this: what's on your mind? What's something you would love to talk about? If you had an audience, is generally what I ask. Like,
well, I think that since I have an audience, I should bring up the fact that within a 6-month period of time, I lost not only my husband, but my son. And that's a very... that's a whole nother topic, and it's a very, very awful, painful thing. But I think that one thing I'd like to say is that if you can surround yourself with people that help you through that, that you can deal with about anything, you know. And I had my children, my husband had 2 children, so my stepchildren, everybody kind of needed me to be the strength, and it makes you become strong. And I think that there's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
That you have to deal. You can't feel sorry for yourself. You can't let it take over.
And that's one of the things that was told to me whenever my mom passed: is don't have pity for yourself.
Right.
Like, you can understand what you feel.
Grief.
You can grieve. Yes, have grief, but don't have pity for yourself because you're still capable.
Right.
Where did you find strength when you needed it, being strong for everyone else during those times? Where did
really
you find your strength?
From them, because I guess just we all needed each other. But I think that to have them need me was what I needed to have happen.
Gotcha.
You know, that they... because it changed everybody. Annie was living in New York. I mean, everybody was, you know, it changed everybody's life.
Yeah.
Everybody ended back in Atlanta trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And we all had to figure it out. And we worked it out together.
That's good.
You know.
What was that process of having the family come back together? What was that? Was that, I understand that it was a very solemn time in life, but was there a partial...
and I don't know that they would not say, for instance, Annie moved back from North Carolina, New York, at some point later. It's just that in the midst of a career, time,
yeah.
You know, they were, didn't really have a choice much.
Right.
And so, I mean, obviously I needed them all here. I wanted them here.
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that happened. Really,
is there anything I missed that you would love to talk about?
Well, let me think about this. I don't know. I just think that live your life to the fullest. Enjoy life. Love people. If you don't love them, stay away from them. Don't get angry with them.
Yeah.
I avoid conflict at all costs. I don't like to argue. I don't argue.
It puts a drain on you.
It really does.
It draws life out of you. And we all need a lot of life right now.
And I think that that's a lot of my heritage is to not have any kind of angst or bitterness or, anything. I just, they talk about the half glass full and half empty, and I'm just a half full person.
Half full person. Well, Annette, here's the point of the episode where we have our previous guest asked you a question. Would you like to know who our previous guest was?
Who?
I cannot tell you. I must tell all the listeners to go back and listen to the last episode to find out who the previous guest is. I will let you know as soon as we stop recording.
Oh, okay.
But our guest asked you, what do you think you can do to make the world a better place?
I don't know. I'd like to think that I could give lots of people lots of money. I think I would, I've volunteered plenty of times, and I think that is something that is worthwhile, the volunteerism. We built 4 houses for Habitat Humanity, helped pay for and build 4 houses in memory of Bill and William. And that was therapeutic. And it was good. I mean, it gave 4 people a home. I think that as a person, the best I can do is just try to be a good example to the folks coming along behind me. I don't know that there's anything I could do to change the world.
Well, I will say you've done that exponentially. You've definitely been an encouragement to myself and everyone that we work with. I think you live that life of doing things to better other people by living it out yourself. So I think that's wonderful. I always I say that I wouldn't change the world. I would change the person next to me and get them to realize their full potential, because their full potential may be able to affect so many more people than I could.
Yes,
so
you're exactly right. I could perhaps affect someone younger than me that's going to carry on. Yeah.
Annette, what is your question for our next guest?
Well, this would be a hard one because somebody asked me this. I'm not sure how I would answer, but if you could change one thing in your life, what would it be? Just one thing.
Okay.
At any age, just one thing.
One thing. I like that. Because that's a really good question. I've had someone else ask me that, and there's things you think you would want to change, but at the same time you're like, but would that affect the rest of my life? To who would I be today if I changed that one thing then?
Yeah.
And that's a really good question. I like that.
Good.
Is there anything you want to plug, and like anything you're watching on TV right now you think people would enjoy? Is there anything you're reading?
I'm looking forward to The Crown tonight because the new season starts tonight.
Does it really? I didn't know that.
And I read a lot, and I've read some very good books. Just finished one called Educated, that is the memoir of a young Mormon girl who had a terrible childhood. And it's interesting because after doing Mama's memoir, I wanted to read it. It's really, really well written. But then as I got more toward the end of it, I thought, is this really right? Did this really happen? You know, something about it made it seem almost surreal. And so after I read it, I did a lot of reading on the response of her family and stuff. And apparently a lot of it is exaggerated and all that. It's a New York Times bestseller book.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, it without knowing any of the other stuff, just as I read it, I thought, wait a minute, does that really ring true?
Right.
You
That's
know,
good. That's actually really, really good
and,
to be able to catch that. That's wild.
And and that's disappointing because it's so well written. And it was a good book. It was a very good book. But it almost became like fiction toward the end.
Gotcha. If you had to recommend one book to anybody, what would you recommend?
Lossie, Live to Laugh.
There we go. I like it. Lossie, Live to Laugh. You can pick it up on Amazon, Walmart.com, and BarnesandNoble.com. My name is Jeremiah. You can find me on Instagram at ParkourGeek, ParkourG33K. You can also find me on YouTube at A Token's Take, ATOKEN''S. TAKE. I'll be uploading videos again there soon, and hopefully they'll be pretty grand. Annette, thank you for joining us on Perspectives. This has been wonderful. If you ever do some more, write another book,
I'll let you know.
Let me know. We'll have you back on the show.
You'll have to help me.
I will. I would love to. It'll be amazing. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Be love, be life, be.